We're so happy to have you here. So, welcome to our Mind the Moment Thursday morning gathering. And that's brought to everybody by Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare and Tufts Health Plan. And I'm Suzanne Rowe Palacino. Happy to be here as I always am on Thursday mornings with Tara Healey, founder and director of Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare's mindfulness program. And we have our special guest this morning, Dr. Amishi Jha. And Dr. Jha is the author of the national bestseller Peak Mind and professor of psychology at the University of Miami. So we're really so happy to have her here to kick off our 4-week Peak Mind Challenge that we'll be orchestrating starting on Monday. So Amishi, we'd just love to know, and you can kind of get into the meat of what we want to talk about this morning, and really what is a peak mind and why should we be interested in cultivating one?
It's obviously fundamental to the way that I thought about writing this entire book. And I would say the first point is that I love the notions that it conjures up of, like, women on mountaintop, like I've done it all. I'm at the peak. But it's a little bit of a twist on that. What I really mean when I say peak mind is a mind that has full access to all of its capacities. And in particular, the brain system I happen to study most closely in my lab, attentional capacity. Because the woman on the mountaintop is only there for a brief moment. Then she's got to get down the mountain and probably go back to her regular life and drive in traffic like I just did. But what it offers us, having full access to all of our attentional capacity, is a way to appreciate those moments of joy and accomplishment and maneuver through those moments of difficulty and challenge. Because it ends up that attention is needed for almost every single thing we do.
Mhm.
So I wanted to write a book that would provide that sort of model of being able to retrain our own brain so we can refuel ourselves to have full access to that capacity.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, it makes so much sense in the fact that, when we are truly paying attention, we can really take in a lot more of the pleasure of life.
Completely agree with what you just said. It absolutely is key to be able to focus in and fully experience the moments of goodness, joy, pleasure. But our attention system is actually quite vulnerable when there are moments of stress and challenge. So, the exact same thing that we need, our attention, in order to maneuver through difficulty successfully, is the system that is most vulnerable. So, it ends up that it's not just about paying attention and really enjoying and experiencing the good, it's keeping attention available so that we can maneuver through the not so good or the challenging.
Mhm.
And both are going to be important to living a life that we find probably most fulfilling.
Mm. Amishi, a question that I just hear often over the years, it sort of makes me laugh a little bit, but is how much time do I have to meditate in order to get benefit? And I think that that is often on folks' minds about, and because we have busy lives, what's the smallest amount that I could actually practice and still get some benefit? And I know you've come up with 12 minutes, and it would be really interesting to hear about that and where the 12 minutes, how you arrived at that.
Yeah. I love that people ask that question. It does show us a lot about our modern conundrum of being
Right.
so time pressured, right? Because in some sense, we wish we didn't have to ask that question. We wish that we could do the
Right.
things that would benefit us in a way that was time unlimited. But we are time pressured, and most of us lead lives where, I could see everybody on the screen that's listening to my voice right now on this call, and ask, how many of you think that you've got plenty of time in your lives to get everything done? There'd be zero hands raised, right? That's just sort of our modern
Right.
situation. So that was also the case in all the research populations that we work with in my lab, which happen to be time pressured, high stress, high demand professionals, probably like many of us, right? Where we all would put ourselves in that category. The work that we did initially with first responders, medical and nursing professionals, military service members had that as a real pressure point. because our initial studies had found that a model like a mindfulness-based stress reduction approach, about 8 weeks of a course, 24 or so hours of time in class, and while MBSR asks for 45 minutes a day, we asked for 30 minutes in some of our initial studies. That was a model, when we just looked at the group as a whole, was useful to these time-pressured folks. But when we dug in and tried to see how many people actually practiced 30 minutes a day, it was virtually nobody. So it may be a sign, but it doesn't mean people are doing that. So we asked people to be as honest as possible and just tell us how much you actually practiced. And only we, as the researchers, got to see it. Our trainer didn't get to see it. So there was a respect there in the division of
Yeah, that's great.
And what we found was that for people to benefit, even in that longer class, it was 12 minutes or more a day that they were practicing in order to see benefits for things that we were studying, in particular, attention, working memory, even mood. So it was, what I would say most broadly is a dose response effect. The more people practiced, the more they benefited. But there was this threshold that said 12 minutes or more. 12 minutes or less, it was almost as if they were not practicing at all or even attending class. They differed, they did not differ from the no training group. Okay, we're triangulating around something that seems like people are doing this range of time more often, and it seems like it's benefiting. Let's do more studies. So in our follow-up studies, we only assigned people 12 minutes a day. We said, we only want you to do 12 minutes. Please do it. We gave them guided practices, and they listened to the 12-minute pre-recorded practices. And we said, please try to do these 7 days a week for the 4-week training, because we were able to cut the training time down as well. We found that people did not do 7 days a week, but they did about 4 to 5 days a week. And we found that when people did about 12 minutes a day, 4 to 5 days a week, they benefited in their attention. When they did less, they did not.
Yeah.
So that's what led us to that sort of prescription. And now across multiple studies, we're more reasonable about the time that we ask for. And we find that people are able to meet that challenge and actually engage in it. So it was our triangulated prescription, just kind of what we call data emergent, right? What the data was showing us. And more than probably that, it was that people were reasonably willing to do it, sort of like a daily dozen. Like, I can do my 12 minutes a day.
Yeah, I mean, and a daily dozen is kind of a nice way to think about it too. That's great. I have another quick question, Amishi. How come we don't remember names when we've been introduced to someone? Why does
Amishi, let me reintroduce myself now. Isn't it such a common thing that we don't remember names, or we might even have an interaction where we have no real knowledge? And oftentimes it can be destabilizing, where you think, oh my gosh, I'm really losing my memory. And a lot of the work as I'm getting older, I'm noticing, well, that, those moments happen more and more. But a lot of the work in my lab is not only looking at mindfulness training and attention, but this other system called working memory. And working memory is this temporary scratch space where we put information that's just come into the system into a more sort of temporarily stored form. And then that's a route by which we can get into our longer term memory. Meaning, if I ask you tomorrow or the next day, hey, who's that Indian lady that wrote Peak Mind? Oh, Amishi, I remember. Like, this is just a way to get information in. Yeah. Oftentimes when we don't remember people's names, it has nothing to do with our memory at all. It has to do with the doorway to our memory, which is our attention. So we do not remember information if we have not paid attention to it. And I think that is a really important thing for people to realize. So when you have those moments of, I'm not remembering stuff, slow down and take note. Were you really there when you were introduced to that person? Did you fully take it in? Did you really even rehearse it over a short period of time to kind of allow it to go from an attentional doorway into working memory and then into long-term memory?
Yeah, and I suppose that would hold true for reading a page in a book where you get to the bottom and say, what was that? I have to go back.
Well, that's for sure true. We weren't paying attention, but the curious thing is, well, where did we go? I mean, we're literally intending to read. We got the book in our hands. We are committed, right? There's not other things we're trying to do at the same time. Our eyeballs may actually have even moved, but we're not there. So that's another whole challenge, which is that our mind can be be intending to engage in a goal, but our attention is not cooperating and we get
Yeah.
hijacked away. And it's something called, the technical term is perceptual decoupling.
Hmm.
So the perception, even if we had people, if we hooked them up to a brainwave recording kit and we were looking to see, is there visual stimulation in their visual cortex? Yes, there is. But when they have these moments of what we call mind wandering, they're perceptually decoupled. It's like as if we turn
Hmm.
down the lights, the perceptual input is just slightly degraded. And the reason that happens is that attention, just like it's important for memory, is key for perception. If we're not fully paying attention, we're not fully perceiving.
Yeah, we're getting this, it's so fascinating. We could probably talk for an hour about this. We're getting some interesting questions in the chat, so I think it would be great for us to come into those. Someone has mentioned that they're reading the section in the book about being present allows us to remember the moment or experience better versus taking photographs which take us away from the moment.
Yes, that's a big one. And that was work that actually now several research groups have looked at, because oftentimes the inclination is pull out the phone and capture the moment. But to truly capture the moment, and these are studies that are rigorously done where people are assigned to capture the moment from their own experiential perspective, like just be there and fully experience it, versus take a photograph of it with the intention to share it with other people. Like take it for the purposes of sharing on social media. And what you find is the people, and then later they're formally tested on their memory for various things that occurred. And their memory is significantly worse in those share on social media moments. And if you think about it, again, it goes back to what we were talking about a moment ago. What allows us to remember information? Our our attention to the moment. So if instead of actually witnessing an event, we are preoccupied with getting the angle right, or even pulling our phone out from our purse or our pocket, that's where our attention is. It's not in the event itself. So the cascade would follow. And I would really encourage people to play around with this in their own lives. It can feel a little scary sometimes of, I really want to capture this. I don't want to miss it. Well, know that even if you are holding the phone in your hand, you can do this where it's sort of already placed there and really fully see what's in front of you so that you don't actually miss what's going on and have that real peripheral embodied knowledge of I am here witnessing what is occurring. That'll help keep it into long-term memory.
Boy, I think people can really relate to that. That's a great little experiment for us all to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
So another question's come in. Why would I want to pay more attention when the moment is difficult?
You know, this is such a in some sense profound question regarding what we do when difficulty arises in our lives. Of course, the inclination may be avert the eyes, avert the gaze. Let's not pay attention to that. That's unpleasant. And if it could serve us to avoid all the unpleasantness in our life and only go toward joy, that'd be quite interesting. But that's not the way life works. It's in the moments of difficulty and challenge that we're probably most likely to need our attention to maneuver through that. And so, and frankly, I'll tell you that service members ask us this often. Like if I was in a really difficult training or something happened to my battle buddy, something really traumatic happened to him, why do I want to be encoding all of this? Why do I want to be here for this? And the first thing I'll say is if somebody in that you're responsible for, whether it's somebody that you lead or a family member or whatever it is, your inclination will be to take action in support of what's going on. And if you are not paying attention, the chances of you being able to see the situations we were talking about a moment ago, perceptually encode what's going on, assess the situation, and take action is going to be compromised. So in some sense, getting more data regarding what's occurring will require paying attention, but that's probably the way you're going to maneuver through the painful and the difficult. The interesting thing is the way we pay attention during difficulty can be manipulated. So for example, instead of let's say it's not even an actual experience, but the memory of an experience. So let's say there's a traumatic memory that arises in one's mind, and it can be very destabilizing. These are some no joke truly destabilizing and negative moment. When that memory arises, instead of being immersed and flooded in it, we can take a different approach. We're still paying attention to it. We're not averting or suppressing, which will not work, by the way, because it
Right.
will come back with full force. But we can relate to it slightly differently. And this is where mindfulness can be so helpful. We can do what's called psychological distancing. So the memory has arisen, and we can actually watch what's occurring in our experience of that memory. I'm feeling my chest is tender now. My
Mm.
jaw's getting clenched. I feel a sense of sadness or overwhelm. We're paying attention to the body sensations, and that
Mhm.
gives us a little bit distance from the immersive, overwhelming aspect of the emotional memory. Or we can take another approach of distancing, isn't sort of to go in and be more embodied, but to actually kind of hover above, get sort of like I sometimes refer to it as sort of a traffic helicopter view of what's going on. Like, oh, Mishi has had a strong memory. Talk to yourself in the third person, like you're a reporter reporting what's occurring. That again is paying attention to the arising of difficulty, but you're giving yourself a little bit of distance so you're not getting flooded, but you're still fully aware and accepting of what's arising. So this is where mindfulness gives us more tools so that we are better able to attend when it's required of us, because action may be needed and people are leaning on us to take that action. But we're also giving ourselves tools so that when these difficult moments arise, we are attending to them in a way that's probably more beneficial than it is going to lead to overwhelm.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I can imagine that's got to be helpful to a lot of folks out there, even just standing away from the situation. Because as we all know, sometimes those situations, those memories, we might have kind of catastrophized them and made them seem bigger
Mm.
than they are. So
Yeah,
that's really helpful. Thank you for
yeah,
that.
absolutely.
Someone's asked as well, 12 minutes all at once or cumulative?
I wish I could tell you 100% for sure, but the way we've studied this in the lab is all at once, so continuous. I
Mm,
will tell you that we've added in more recent studies we've done. We just did a very large study with soldiers that just, this is a partnership with the Department of Defense, soldiers that just arrived and they're in basic combat training. They're not even soldiers yet. They're actually kind of soldiers in training. And what we had them do there is do informal mindfulness practices. So what we call embedded mindfulness practices. And those of us that have been practicing for a while might have these moments happen often, right? Where it's like, okay, at the start of a meeting, I might take a moment to arrive. I'm not at the last meeting, I'm at this one. Or if you're a caregiver or healthcare provider, maybe as you're approaching the door of a patient, you actually feel, yourself picking up the file, taking a look at it, feel the temperature of the knob as you're opening the door. These are moments where we're fully embodied and have arrived to experience the present moment with this observational stance multiple times throughout the day. So that's what we call embedded practices. What we find is that when people do 3 or more of those a day, they also benefit in terms of their well-being, and and even things like team cohesion can benefit.
Mhm.
So for my answer for the 12 minutes is we only know about the continuous because we haven't assigned people to break it down. But there is this growing evidence that micro moments of mindfulness can be quite helpful, kind of interspersed throughout the day. So you're not
Mm.
closing your eyes and paying attention to the breath. You're in whatever moment you're in, but you have that mindful quality to that you're bringing with it.
Yeah, and that makes it nice because it's all like almost anything we do, we can bring that kind of attention to it, right? It's just can seamlessly fit in with our lives. So, we don't have to always take time apart, but I think they both inform each other.
Yeah, and I would say I would at this point recommend still take the time apart,
Yeah,
in the same way that we might try to take the stairs instead of an elevator to get our steps in.
yes.
But we still would want to go to the gym and get 30 minutes of intensive cardio. But we don't
Yeah.
want to miss those moments of, it's almost like a twofer.
we have lots of questions coming in. I know our time is tight for maybe one more minute. How, someone's asked, how can we handle the resistance to meditation? Um, and I'm not sure if the resistance is actually sitting or during the practice of resistance, what Stephanie's asked.
It could
It's,
be a
yeah, I
lot
would
of
want
things. Yeah.
to unpack that, but let's just talk about one thing I hear about commonly with resistance. And both of you, as seasoned teachers, know this as well. my mind just won't stop generating thoughts. It's just, I'd rather do anything else than sit here. It's like a thought pump that just keeps pumping it out. I would be so great at mindfulness practice if my mind would just could just get cleared. And the thing I really think is important, or actually sit down.
Mhm.
Well, first of all, I would encourage people to engage in practices that most align and reduce the friction. So if sitting is hard, do a walking practice,
Yeah.
right? Or if body scan is not comfortable, try another practice. And that's why even in the book, as we'll journey through over the next several weeks, um, there are a variety of practices, and I encourage people to go through and at least follow the sort of plan to get familiar with all of them. And then for your life, you're going to do what the thing that makes the most sense and is most comfortable for you. But this resistance aspect, let's say you get yourself to sit down or do a walking practice and you still feel that like, I'm just not good at this. My brain is not cooperating. My brain happens to be very busy, so it can't quiet. Like I've heard a lot of that. And I'm like, oh man, I'm so sorry, but that's the human condition. Brain is very busy. Um, but I think that we got to flip the narrative in some sense. Instead of thinking, if once my mind can calm down, then I'll be able to practice. Think, this is the nature of the mind. We mind
Right.
wander 50% of our waking moments, and it's going to be generating. And, even the first practice in the book, I call it the find your flashlight practice, with attention being like a flashlight. And I didn't call it the focus your flashlight or direct your flashlight. I called it the find your flashlight because, in some sense, if we know where our attention is, that's an empowered moment where we can do something about it. So if our mind wanders 1,000 times, and that's probably an underestimate in a 10, 15 minute, 12-minute practice, if we know where it is, we can redirect it back to where we want it to be. So I would say explore that feeling of resistance, even in terms of what it feels like in the body. Many ways we can advantage ourselves, and they're in such good hands with you both as their guides to do that when the resistance arises.